I'm Elisa Parker. We're broadcasting here from the Wild and Scenic Film Festival, celebrating 17 years. Wild and Scenic is one of the largest environmental film fests of its kind in the United States. We have over 500 volunteers that make this happen, and we also have several thousand everyday extraordinary environmental action heroes that come to this community at the base of the Sierras. I'm so honored and thrilled to have the extraordinary Jeremy Jones with us. He has had several films featured here at Wild and Scenic, but it's been a while since Jeremy's actually been here in the community. So welcome back, Jeremy. It's good to have you here.
Thank you. Yes, well, this is go to a lot of film festivals, and this one is really high on the list.
High on the list. And your film this year is Ode to Muir.
Yes.
So it's kind of in our own backyard.
It's definitely in our backyard, which is, I live in Truckee, an hour away from here, and I live here because of the Sierra, and I've really embraced these grand adventures in my backyard.
Right. I should also mention, I'd be surprised if you don't know about Jeremy, but he is an extreme sports activist and snowboarder and surfer, and has been acclaimed as one of the most extreme sports. What was one of the recent nominees you got? Your adventures, extreme sport adventures. If you can imagine, hiking up to these, what most people would consider highly dangerous, never been visited, gone to peaks. Jeremy goes to those and then he snowboards down them. That's all.
That's good recap.
That's all, right.
Yes.
Well, I've been watching a lot of your films recently too.
Okay, all right.
What has been one of the craziest things you've done recently?
Well, recently this film, Ode to Muir, we started on the eastern side of the Sierra and we crossed the western side. It was a 10-day trip and we really had no plan. And so that was a very daunting feeling, kind of leaving the trailhead, hoping there'd be someone on the other side of the Sierra, not sure exactly how we were going to get there. That kind of highlights some recent adventures and the type of adventure that I'm doing more and more of these days, which is these longer foot-powered trips and going to these more remote areas and finding beautiful peaks, hiking up them, and snowboarding back down them.
Like Shangri-La.
Like Shangri-La, yes.
Yeah. A lot of people aren't going to Shangri-La and snowboarding down Jeremy. So what was your motivation to even do something like that in the first place? I know you've had a lot of crazy descents like that in the first place, but that one's pretty extreme.
Well, I have, since I was a little kid, I just fell in love with the mountains, and and really it just took over my life, and I become obsessed with, not obsessed, or sometimes obsessed, but I just love the feeling of constantly evolving, constantly doing things I've never done before. That feeling of that. Early on, I could do that underneath the chairlift. Now, at times, I've taken that to remote corners of the world, and I just like these beautiful, I'm not looking for necessarily the highest peaks, but I want the most beautiful peaks with the best snow, and just really interact with the mountain and see if it's right, and if all the everything lines up, then I'm able to walk up these and snowboard down them.
Walk it. It's a pretty intense climb, actually, to reach some of these peaks. And you mentioned in Ode to Muir how all of you hiked in to explore. And I know that's something that shifted for you in probably the last 10 years or so, where instead of helicoptering in, you're actually getting more deeply connected to that environment and space and climbing up. How has that made a difference for you, as an enthusiast and snowboarding and just being connected to our wild world?
Yeah, I think, snowboarding, it's a useless act in some sense, but for me, it's how I connect with nature. It's it's like Idiot's Guide to Present Moment. When you're out there, it's just hard. You
can't not be present moment because there's real life danger sometimes.
Exactly. So it's really, over time, I'm always like, all right, what is getting me most excited to wake up early and go snowboarding? And it's been these new things. And I just realized a while ago, I'm like, man, these mountains that I walk into and live amongst for days, sometimes weeks at a time, this experience is real. It's harder, yes, but it's this very rich experience that really stays with me my whole life. And so I just, following my heart has led me everywhere, really.
And your heart's led you even to environmental activism around our climate. And so, and that's one of the other parts I love about this film festival is a lot of the folks that we speak with who are in these adventure films, for example, actually become really deeply involved and active in protecting the environment that they're really part of. So tell us about your nonprofit, how that involves protecting our winters. And this is taking you to a whole other level in your life of speaking to Congress, for example. Expand on that a little bit.
Yeah. So about, I guess, a little over 10 years ago now, I started a nonprofit, Protect Our Winters. It's focused on uniting the outdoor community to come together to slow down climate change. And that's been, I didn't know it at the time, but it's been this really, obviously, this huge challenge, really constantly learning, and it's become more and more a bigger and bigger part of my life as I realize the severity of the issue.
Right. So what are you focusing on right now around that as it relates to the nonprofit?
Yeah, so it's funny, when I started it, originally it was like all about light bulbs and water bottles and things of that nature, which is super important, personal carbon footprint. But from the beginning, it was always about surrounding myself with the smartest people in the field. And so quickly we realized to have real CO2 reduction, we need a global carbon fee. How do you get a global carbon fee? You have leaders running these countries that are climate champions. And so that has led us to really roll up our sleeves and do everything we can to elect climate champions to office.
You know what I love about your story too, Jeremy, is you talk about in one of your films, like growing up academically, that wasn't always an area like you really, I don't want to say focused on, but probably like is considering yourself,
you could say
right?
that.
Okay. So
my kids aren't here.
And I want to talk to you about that too, and the shift in even being a parent and doing extreme sports. But I mean, what was that like for you the first time? You're a risk taker, but what was it like in taking this risk and speaking to Congress for the first time around this, for example?
Yeah, it's funny because I pretty often have been in scenarios in my life in the mountains where it's on the edge of life and death. 2 feet that way is death, 2 feet that way is, you live. And ironically, what has kept me up at night is not this like walking the edge of life and death on a cliff. It's been these kind of societal risk taking, whether it's, at the time when I went from I was making all these films with helicopters going to foot powered. I'm like, oh, it's going to be the end of my career. So scared. To starting a company, to starting this nonprofit, to talking to Congress. And it's intense. But ironically, the same mode that gets me ready to go and drop into some extreme phase, which is just kind of, breathing and present moment and preparation, is, that same skill set is what's needed to talk to Congress.
Right, right. As being a parent now and having younger kids, there is a scene in one of the movies I watched where it was a Shangri-La. Maybe it was, right?
Yeah.
And you're on top of there, hiked all the way up.
Yeah.
And then there's clouds because weather shifts really quick.
Yeah.
When you're in that kind of country. And you have to make a choice and say, oh, I'm not going to be able to go down. I better I'm going to have to crawl down now. I mean, I'm sure there's some changes that you've made, right? And to some degree around that, just with the risk taking and so forth, as being a parent now.
Yeah, I mean, when we were in that scenario, I had 2 kids. My kids my oldest is 13, youngest is 10, so I had 2 kids at home that day. And I kind of, they're on my shoulder when I go into the mountains. And the whole thing with risk and everything is I've always been on this path of like, it's got to feel right. And if that means if I lose the appetite for really extreme things, I lose the appetite for it. I have no whatsoever concern with that. So I really just see where it takes me and let other people dictate if my snowboarding's good enough to warrant being a professional snowboarder or what have you. And I do think that, you know, now that my kids are older and doing a lot more snowboarding with them, I realize there's more weight to my decision making.
Mm-hmm. Right. And in the film Ode to Muir, you bring, is it Alana? With
Yes.
you, a 2-time Olympian,
Yeah.
and come out with you on that adventure. What do you look for when you're selecting, you know, partners on some of these journeys and experiences?
Yeah, finding the right group is key, and I'd say the constant is being able to suffer, bringing a sense of humor, which is how you
That's how you deal with overcome the suffering,
yeah,
right?
so you got to be able to laugh at the ridiculous stuff. A real love of being out there and just snowboarding and not nothing bothers me more than people being out in these beautiful places and being like, I wish the snow was better. Like that drives
Can't
me
deal
nuts.
with, right.
I'm just
Can't
like,
deal with that, right.
That is, so they need to have a deep love of snowboarding and be able to suffer.
How is it that you ended up for this film selecting that backcountry and what is it, Muir
Wilderness.
Muir Wilderness? I want to say Muir Woods, but that's in Marin County.
Yes,
that wouldn't be as extreme.
No, it's beautiful though.
Yeah, the Muir Wilderness.
The beauty with the Sierra is it's this incredibly, it's a huge range, and it's really protected because of the work of Muir and many other people that are no longer with us, over 100 years ago that had this long vision to say, I want to protect this for future generations. And with the Sierra, I just pick the thick parts of the range, I mean the widest parts. And if I haven't been there, then I go there. Like, it's all good. There's no secrets to it. The trick is just getting to that trailhead. From there, once you kind of walk through that portal, it all works.
What are like one thing you want us to know about that area, and why it's so important, especially to our community, as it's like in our backyard?
Well, I think about really the audacity of these, past forefathers to say, like, we need to protect deep wilderness. Where we were going through that, very few people go through there. And you think about it in, could they do that in today's environment or what have you? And I think that they put so much value on the importance of having this. You have the Muir Woods Wilderness that a lot of people can walk very simply through, which is very important. And then you have this deep wilderness and the importance on humankind to have that and to be able to, the perspective that is gained from being out there. I'm just really grateful for their work.
My last question is, Jeremy, you are someone that's taken a lot of firsts, and I'm curious, like, in looking at your own, like, legendary status, right? I mean, we all are showing up and looking at how we want to be seen as legends in our lives. It's a big part, I think, of Wild and Scenic too. Every day people can show up in this capacity. What do you want people to say about you? Like, how do you want to be best known?
Wow. No one's ever asked me that question. But I'd say, I guess my heart led the way, and my, motives were pure. You may not agree with them, but just really for me, especially, having kids and even before that, just ideally leave the place better than you found it.
Leave it better than you found it.
Yeah.
Anywhere else that you're heading to soon?
Back down to the Sierra.
Back down to the Sierra?
Yeah, we got this beautiful storm on us right now, and we have a high pressure coming. So I'm actually going to get reunited with my tent.
All right. Winter camping.
Yes.
Winter camping. Jeremy Jones, it's so great to have you here. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us at Wild and Scenic Film Fest. Love what you're doing. It's extraordinary. But I also think it showcases that, I mean, not all of us need to go to the peaks of Shangri-La, right? It's like going into your own community and seeing what's in our own backyard, right?
Absolutely. And that, it was really important to me. I remember when I premiered that movie and it ends with this Himalayan peak and I was like, the next one's in the backyard.
In the backyard.
To show how rich of an experience you can have in your backyard. And in this film, and because I've been around the country with it, it's not about like, oh, the Sierra is the most incredible place ever. It's like, it's all good. So I just would like to say thanks for having me at this film festival and putting this festival on. It's really important. So please keep it up.
Yeah, and come back again.
I will.
The film is Ode to Muir, in addition to like all the other hundreds of other films that Jeremy's participated in and has created. And his nonprofit's called Protect Our Winters. I'm Elisa Parker. It is the Wild and Scenic Film Fest. Stay tuned for more stories like these.